kind of a newsy couple of days in the Pac-12. Most notably, win totals came out, according to our friends at FanDuel for the Pac-12. Yeah, that's right, Pac-12 regular season wins. Oregon State and Washington State, their win totals are, drumroll please, 7.5 each. They both have the exact same win total. I think that's about right. Both have questions at quarterback. Their rosters, if you compare them to the rest of the Mountain West, upper tier. And when you think of a 7.5 win total, you think of conference contender capable. We're going to talk about Arizona later. Plenty of people see them as a Big 12 conference title contender. I don't, personally. I don't put them in the same class as Utah and Kansas State and Kansas or Oklahoma State. I'd put them in that next tier in the Big 12. But for Oregon State, Washington State, remember, group of 5 teams have access, have a path to the playoff. And for these schools, their ability to make the playoff this year hinges, but it's plural. English is hard. They have to win their big rivalry games. Oregon State's got to find a way to beat Oregon. Not going to be easy. Washington State has to find a way to beat Washington. It'll be easier, but still not very easy because Jedd Fisch has brought in plenty of talent, and Washington has got the same win total, but in a significantly tougher conference with a much tougher schedule over in the Big Ten. But still, I'm glad those matchups are continuing, and I hope they do forever and ever because college football, fundamentally about regional rivalries. Those are the best, most important days of the year. But if they were to go 11-1, would they be in the discussion? Yeah. Now, they wouldn't have a conference championship right here, right now, which is segueing very nicely into my next point. In about a month's time in Las Vegas, the Mountain West Conference will have its media days, and I am almost certain that Gloria Nevarez, the commissioner of the Mountain West, will be asked, as she has many times before, about realignment, what the next moves are. She's been pretty standard with her comments so far in that she's not dodging the question. She's saying we always evaluate opportunities, looking for this, but we're not trying to. We feel like we're in a good spot. We like our member. Like, it's just very pretty standard commissioner talk. But I think the Mountain West scheduling alliance with Oregon State and Washington State is pretty telling because on the one side, Oregon State and Washington State may attempt to lure Mountain West schools into their conference. But guess what? That door is open both ways. Gloria Nevarez is going to attempt to lure those schools into the Mountain West and say, let's make this league the premier Western-based football and basketball conference in the country. And you've got a president of Washington State in Kirk Schultz who's been very open about the fact that he believes there should be an elite premier West Coast league. Maybe he views the entire Mountain West as being worth that. Maybe he wants some of them and some of the American, wants to pick and choose a little bit more. But then you would start to push away from that statement, that sentiment, and people can go back on their words. That's happened more than a few times in the realignment landscape in the last several years. But I think for Washington State and Oregon State, they're going to play this season. And one of those teams, it's more likely than not that one of those teams goes under and one of those teams goes over. Let's say one, just pick one. Random. I'll go with Oregon State. I'm not saying it's more likely, Coug fans, just hypothetically. If one of those teams goes 10-2 with that schedule and has a couple of solid Power 5 wins, like let's say Washington State loses to Washington and they lose one other game, but they've got to win over Texas Tech and they win the head-to-head with Oregon State, and then Oregon State is like an 8 or a 9 win team, and Wazoo's sitting there at 10-2 feeling really, really good about the season they just had. You know what they're going to think about at the end of the year? The fact that their access to the playoff is not non-existent, but it is severely depleted and diminished because they don't have a conference championship. Is that going to be tenable for 2 seasons? Could be. Absolutely could. Or do they make a move going into 2025? I would think with the Mountain West media rights deal expiring after next season, that's when the moves are going to take place. I have not wavered off of that belief because that is when everything lines up. It's when the scheduling alliance would end, the temporary partnership with the West Coast Conference for the non-revenue sports and basketball would come to a close. Washington State and Oregon State will be on the market. And certainly, as I talked about on Friday's show, they'll try and shop themselves to the Big 12 and the ACC, because if you can get an invite there, you could make a case that's a preferable option. Is the stability great? Perhaps not. You could argue there's more stability, even if you talk about the Big 12, which is certainly a more stable situation than the ACC by a landslide right now. That's not even kind of close. Would you rather go to a conference that is significantly behind the Big 10 and the SEC, but is trying to compete at that level? Or would you rather formulate a league that could perhaps one day have its own playoff and national championship? Some people are going to answer that question one way. Most people would probably say, oh, you got to go into the Big 12 and ACC. Some people might say, and I think that you can be plenty reasonable and think either one of these things. But the other side of that coin is, well, if we're not going to get to the same level as Georgia and Alabama anyway, why don't we just define success as competing against like-minded, similarly leveled universities and football programs? Why don't we just do that? I don't think that's a completely flawed way of thinking. But when the Mountain West Media Days happen in early July, I will be watching for what Commissioner Nevarez says about where she feels the conference needs to go. What steps do you need to take to ensure that your league has long-term success and viability? And one of the ways that you can do that is make a pitch to Oregon State and Washington State. And one of those pitches should certainly be, do you see that team over there? Whoever it is, let's say it's Tulane, for instance, who may be coming up as a subject later this week on the show. See how they won the American Conference Championship? They had a 10-2 regular season. Then they beat Memphis, for instance, who had a 9-3 regular season. They beat them, and now they're in the playoff. And do you see, Oregon State, how you went 10-2, but you don't have that opportunity? The only way either of these schools, Oregon State, Washington State, get into the playoff this year, they'd have to win minimum 11 games, probably 12. Now, if you win 12 games, you're probably in. That is not hyper. You would have multiple quality Power 5 wins, and you would have gone through an entire Mountain West slate and been unbeaten. Yeah, go 12-0, you're in. That's not going to happen for either of these teams. Not just because, they have to play each other, so one of them is guaranteed to have at least one loss, but because I just don't think they have the teams to go 12-0, because it turns out that is immensely difficult. So I just wonder about what their next steps are and how this football season feels to them. Is it exciting? Is it fun? Is it worthwhile? I think it will be. I think it absolutely can be. The Mountain West has played a lot of great football over the years. But what does it feel like to have Oregon State and Washington State there? How do they compare themselves? How do they view themselves to the teams they're actually going to be playing? Last week I was talking about the leagues that they would like to be in, but what about the situations they're currently in? How's that going to feel? We don't know. It's going to feel different once conference play, quote unquote, begins for the Pac-12, and they start playing that Mountain West schedule, and you go, wow, this is, are they just way above? Are they falling back to that level? We don't know. But what we will know is by the end of the year, whether or not they are going to feel a greater sense of urgency or need to go out there and join a conference. Or have something. Can they go through 2025 and say, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We can do this again and then make a move in 2026, and we'll have 2 seasons where we're just playing good football, building a culture, showcasing our programs, establishing, a credibility with our coaches and letting them showcase what they can do in these respective cities, and then we make our move in 26. Maybe. But I'm more than a little bit curious. But the win totals actually being out, if you got questions about that, want me to break them down? Over, under? Oof. Overs and unders in June. We're not that far out from prediction season, which starts on this show probably end of July, early August. I would guess, because there are a lot of teams to cover, naturally. One of those teams is going over. At least one. At least one of Oregon State, Washington State is going over 7.5. Both? I don't know. I got to let that marinate a little bit. This episode is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality candidates that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. It's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Good price. Terms and conditions apply.